The sky over the city was ash-gray, thick with the smoke of what used to be hope. Buildings stood hollowed out like broken teeth, windows shattered, doors hanging from hinges, and every alley whispered with the memory of screams. The dead didn't run anymore. They waited. Watching. Learning. But within the crumbling heart of the city, 30 people still drew breath, and that, in this world, was a miracle. Cassandra Bell stood atop a tilted billboard, binoculars pressed to her eyes. Her dark hair was tied back with frayed cloth, and a cracked watch on her wrist ticked uselessly. Below her, the remnants of downtown were crawling again. Not with cars or people, but with shadows, staggering bodies, twitching necks, sunken eyes locked on invisible sounds. East Side's about to breach again, she said flatly, not taking her eyes off the movement. 300, maybe 4. Slow, but tight. They're pressing the barricade. Behind her, Gabriel Kim climbed up with a grunt, slinging a hunting rifle across his back. The barricade won't hold until nightfall. We have 3-4 hours tops. Cassandra lowered her binoculars and exhaled, the weight of leadership coiled tightly in her chest. They had lost the South Gate 3 days ago. North was still holding, but only because they'd burned everything in a 3-block radius. We can't run. We've got no path out, and radio contact hasn't picked up in 9 days, she muttered. We dig in. Again. They weren't soldiers. Not anymore. Cassandra had been a schoolteacher. Gabriel, a computer repair tech. But when the deadfall hit and the safe zones collapsed, survival didn't care what you were before. The fortress, their so-called sanctuary, was stitched together from steel doors, shipping containers, crushed buses, and faith. They called it the core. Every block they'd cleared, every rooftop they'd fortified, had been bought with blood. Inside, the other 28 survivors were working, repairing water barrels, scavenging old med kits, reinforcing weak points with scrap metal and burned-out furniture. Children no longer played. Even the youngest had seen what the monsters did to the careless. We need eyes on the western fence too, Cassandra said as she hopped down from the billboard. Tell Luca and Sherry to take shifts. Gabriel nodded. And if they get overwhelmed? Then they fall back and light the beacons. That was the deal. The beacons, flares wired to signal a breach, were their last warning before a wall came down. They had 4 left. Just 4. Inside the core, the atmosphere was tense. Sherry Morales was patching up a wounded boy, 12 years old, gashed by glass during a scavenging run. Luca, her partner, was in the watchtower, scanning with a scope and scrawling notes on a piece of faded notebook paper. Everyone had a role. No one had time to grieve. By noon, the groaning had intensified. It came in waves, sound without source, a pressure that sunk into your bones. That was how they knew the horde was truly near. The undead moved like a tide, drawn by instinct, hunger, and sound. Always sound. Cassandra entered the central command shack, a hollowed-out van stacked with maps, scavenged electronics, and an old radio powered by car batteries. She turned the dial again, desperate for anything but static. Her fingers paused when a faint pulse broke through. Zone 30, survivors, hold. The voice was barely audible, crackling like a ghost in a storm. But it was enough. Cassandra leaned in. Repeat transmission. This is Cassandra Bell of the Core, we have 30 survivors, repeat, 30. Silence. Then nothing. She slammed her fist against the console. Damn it. Outside, a horn sounded. One short blast. Luca. West breach. Cassandra burst from the van, grabbing the radio and shouting, positions. We've got movement on the west side. Within moments, the survivors rallied. Gabriel, Sherry, Luca, Naomi, Jamal, Lien, all moving like a system of nerves in a single desperate body. They formed firing lines behind the barricades, archers on rooftops, riflemen behind sandbags, and the melee group with blades and rebar by the gate. Then they heard it, wood splintering. Screams. A guttural snarl that no living throat could produce. The west gate began to buckle. Cassandra felt her heart race, not from fear, but from the cold knowledge that tonight could be the end. Yet she raised her voice, steady as a mountain, and called, "Hold your ground. If we break, they win. If we fall fighting." And so, the final 30 prepared to make a stand against the tide of death once more. The west gate screamed under the pressure, a groan of twisted metal and dying hinges. On the other side, the undead surged forward, limbs slamming against the barricade like waves battering a crumbling dam. Dust fell in clouds. Every thud sent shivers through the walls. Cassandra's eyes scanned the formation. The archers, Sherry, Devon, and Elena, had climbed onto the overlook platforms. Gabriel and Jamal knelt with rifles behind overturned dumpsters. And the melee unit waited in silence, eyes hard, breathing slow. "Wait for my mark," Cassandra yelled, standing just behind the front line. "Let them get close." The undead didn't charge blindly. Not anymore. These were the ones that had been out here longest. They didn't speak, but they understood pressure. They learned from the desperate. A sudden crack echoed like thunder. The barricade split at its base, 2 rusted hinges popping loose. The dead surged through the breach like water bursting a dam. "Now!" Cassandra roared. Arrows flew. Rifles fired. The front rank of the dead stumbled as steel and lead tore into rotted flesh. But for every one that fell, 3 more clawed forward. The line of 30 humans began to bend under the weight of numbers. Luca dropped from the overlook, swinging a pipe wrapped in barbed wire. He met the first corpse face to face, crushing its skull with a sickening crunch. Sherry jumped down beside him, blade in hand, eyes wild. "Back! Push them back!" Jamal barked as he reloaded, but the gate wasn't holding. It had split too wide. The flanking dead began to pour in from the sides. Gabriel turned and shouted toward Cassandra, "We're losing the corner. If they loop around." "I know," she answered, pulling a flare from her belt. She fired it into the sky. A bright blue light erupted above the fortress, crackling with sparks. It wasn't just a warning for their team. It was a message to anyone watching from above, if anyone still was. The city had eyes, even in death. Inside the central courtyard, Naomi sprinted to the ammo stores, her lungs burning. She was barely 17 but carried herself like a veteran. She tossed extra clips and bolts to the front line, yelling names as she threw. Devon. Sherry. Gabe. The undead were pushing through now, some climbing over their own, using fallen corpses like ladders. Cassandra grabbed her machete, the same one she'd carried since the 3rd month. It had once belonged to her brother. Now, she used it to sever jaws and slice through necks. A scream echoed from the northern side. Elena had been dragged from her perch. "Cover her," Cassandra called, but it was too late. A pool of blood soaked the ground where she'd vanished. Gabriel gritted his teeth. "We're thinning. Fall back to the inner perimeter." The retreat was organized, but costly. As they pulled back behind the second gate, a wall of welded cars and furniture, 5 more survivors had fallen. Blood marked the stone beneath their feet. Cassandra slammed the lock bar down. "We hold here. This is it." No one spoke. Everyone knew what she meant. If the second wall fell, there was no third. Just the bunker, the emergency cellar, and the long silence after death. The dead were pounding again. Inside the command van, the old radio flickered. Naomi rushed in, breath ragged. "I think someone's out there." Cassandra looked up. "What?" She clicked the receiver. Static. Then, through the noise, came a fragment. 30, hold position, evac not confirmed. Her heart skipped. Say again. Repeat that message, she shouted, but the signal faded once more. Gabriel appeared in the doorway. They're testing the wall. Slower this time. They're not charging, they're circling. That was worse. It meant the undead had learned the shape of the trap. They weren't just feeding. They were sieging. Like predators with patience. Cassandra rubbed her temples. We need to rest, rotate watch, and ration everything. Tonight will be longer than the last. But how long do we keep this up? Jamal asked, voice low. We've lost 5. We're down to 25. No supply runs in 2 days. No rescue. Just. He trailed off. Just us, Gabriel finished grimly. Outside, the moans returned, slow, methodical. Not hunger anymore. Just pressure. Constant. Endless. Cassandra stepped out, eyes scanning the broken skyline. Somewhere beyond the high-rises and burnt avenues, someone had sent a signal. Someone knew they were still alive. They just had to hold. We are the final 30, she said aloud, her voice firm, eyes hard. If we die here, we die as the wall that held back the tide. But I swear to you, we are not done yet. Around her, the survivors raised their heads. Even in ruin, even surrounded, they were not alone. The second wall held, for now. Cassandra stood atop a shipping container that formed the outer line of the inner barricade. The twisted bodies of the undead lay piled in front of the gate like discarded mannequins, but more pressed at the edges beyond sight. She could hear them, snarling, scraping, groaning, always moving, always there. The sound never stopped anymore. It filled the silence between breaths. The courtyard behind her had shifted from a place of organization to one of urgency. Naomi was distributing what's left of the medical kits, while Gabriel and Jamal reinforced the barricades with salvaged steel rods and bent rebar. The fires burned low, no more fuel could be spared. Smoke curled into the darkening sky like a warning to gods no one believed in anymore. Sherry sat slumped beside the infirmary tent, her hands shaking, a knife across her knees. Her eyes hadn't moved since Elena died. We have to burn the bodies, she whispered. Cassandra heard her. We will. Sherry turned, eyes bloodshot. Not later. Now. Before the rot spreads. Before the sickness comes. We can't afford to light another fire out front. It'll draw every corpse in this city straight to us. They already know we're here. Sherry snapped. Cassandra knelt beside her, hand resting on the woman's shoulder. And that's exactly why we're still alive. They think they've cornered us. But they don't know what's waiting on the other side of these walls. Sherry blinked slowly. Do we know? For a moment, Cassandra said nothing. Then she stood. We will. That night, they burned the bodies, but inside the walls. The center courtyard became a funeral pyre. Twisted remains of their own fallen, stacked with infected corpses from the breach. Flames danced against the fortress walls, casting long shadows on cracked pavement. It smelled like rubber, blood, and sorrow. Gabriel stood guard near the fire with Luca, scanning for movement in the distance. We're going to be next, he muttered. Luca didn't respond. Instead, he held out a worn photograph, 3 smiling children, a woman in a red dress. His family. Before. Gabriel glanced at it and nodded silently. No one asked about the past anymore. You either carried it quietly or let it eat you from the inside. Back in the command van, the radio still buzzed occasionally, like a broken promise. Naomi stayed close, taking notes every time it flared with life. It had become her obsession, tracking patterns, listening for frequency shifts, whispering possible codes. "There's someone out there," she told Cassandra quietly. "I know it. We heard it too." Evac not confirmed. Naomi's fingers moved fast across the page. "But that means it was considered. Maybe even launched. What if they just haven't found us yet?" Cassandra hesitated. "Or maybe they have, and they didn't like what they saw." Later, Jamal called for a meeting. The survivors gathered around the dying fire, backs to the walls. 25 now. Faces drawn, arms bandaged, stomachs empty. "We can't wait for help anymore," Jamal said. "We need to push out. Hit the west side before sunrise. Find fuel, meds, food, something." "We'll lose people," Gabriel said. "We're already losing people," Jamal replied. Cassandra looked around the circle. She saw fear, yes, but deeper than that, she saw fire. Anger. Grit. They weren't ready to die. "We move at first light," she decided. 6 of us. Everyone else stays and holds the core. We split comms between the teams. If anything happens, we fall back. Luca raised a hand. "What about fire?" Everyone turned. He pointed to a side panel on the map of the city. "The old propane yard on 7th and Chambers. It's outside the zone, barely. But if we hit it, we can set traps, fuel our generators, even build a burn wall if we have to." "That's a suicide run," Gabriel muttered. "Or the thing that buys us another month," Cassandra said. Silence. Then one by one, hands rose. "I'm in," said Jamal. "Me too," added Sherry, fire returning to her eyes. "Let's burn back the night," Naomi whispered. The group disbanded quietly, returning to what rest they could find. Inside her makeshift quarters, a room once used for storing canned goods, Cassandra pulled out a worn journal. She flipped past pages filled with ration logs, survivor counts, escape plans, and fallback ideas. At the bottom of one page were 5 names, scratched out. Then she added a 6th, Elena. A soft knock pulled her from the page. It was Gabriel. "We need to reinforce the north barricade before we leave. They're testing it now, slow but steady." She stood, exhaustion weighing every step. "I'll take first shift." "You sure?" "I'd rather be out there than in here with the ghosts." He handed her his flask. "There's still a little bourbon in there. Save it for when we make it out." Cassandra smirked faintly. "If we make it out." "No," Gabriel said, stepping out into the night. "When?" As the fire dimmed behind her and the undead began to stir just beyond the wall, Cassandra climbed to her post, blade in hand, eyes forward. Inside the dead zone, there was no tomorrow. But tonight, there was fire, and it was theirs. The morning came quiet, but in the dead zone, silence was never a gift, it was a warning. A trap waiting to be sprung. Cassandra led the team through the northern breach just before sunrise. Jamal, Naomi, Sherry, Luca, and Gabriel moved like shadows behind her, dressed in scavenged armor, leather jackets with metal plates sewn in, steel-toed boots, gloves duct-taped at the wrists. Every step had purpose. Every sound they made was deliberate and controlled. The city was gray and skeletal in the light, its windows blind, its streets littered with rusting cars and toppled power poles. No birds. No wind. Just the low hum of the undead somewhere beyond the fog. "We stay tight," Cassandra whispered, eyes darting toward a nearby rooftop. "No shots unless it's clean and quiet. If one turns, the rest will come." Gabriel nodded, pulling the bolt back on his rifle with a soft click. 7th and Chambers is 4 blocks out. Through Old Market. "That's Walker territory," Sherry muttered. Jamal grinned. We don't need all of us to make it back. Just one with a canister. No one laughed. Old Market was worse than they remembered. Collapsed stalls blocked the main road. Corpses, rotted and dry, were draped across railings and tied to poles like decorations from a forgotten war. Some had been killed clean, skull crushed or chest shot out, but others bore marks of desperation, knives still lodged in ribs, wrists bound, torn clothing. Not all had died fighting zombies. Some had died fighting each other. Humans did this, Naomi said softly. Cassandra didn't reply. She just raised her fist and signaled the group to move around the edge of the market square, staying low beneath the cover of overturned tables and rusted tarps. Halfway through, Luca froze. On the left, movement. They dropped instantly. Two figures limped through the far corridor. At first glance, they looked human, no rot, no twitching. One had a backpack. The other carried a pipe. Scavs? Jamal asked. Could be, Cassandra replied. Could also be biters who haven't turned yet. We stay low and let them pass. But the figures stopped. One sniffed the air. Its head cocked unnaturally to the side. Gabriel cursed under his breath. Sniffers. The figure let out a low, warbling growl. Its partner twisted, mouth opening wider than any human jaw should. The illusion dropped in an instant. Contact. Cassandra hissed. The group moved fast. Gabriel took the shot, clean, suppressed. The first sniffer dropped. Jamal lunged with a hooked blade and gutted the second before it could scream. But the noise had already triggered a reaction. Down the far corridor, more shapes began to appear. Time to run. Sherry shouted. They bolted, weaving through the debris. Naomi led the way, kicking down a broken door into an alley that sloped downward toward Chambers Street. Behind them, growls grew louder, faster. Don't stop. We're 2 blocks out. Cassandra shouted. They reached Chambers as the first real swarm rounded the corner. Dozens. Maybe more. Sprinting now, not shambling. Mutated types. Fast. There. Gabriel pointed. A half-collapsed chain-link fence marked the edge of the propane yard. Tanks were stacked in rows, gleaming in the early light like precious silver. Cassandra dove through the gap in the fence, rolled, and came up with her blade drawn. Secure the perimeter, she barked. Naomi, start loading the canisters, we only take what we can carry. Sherry and Luca took the flank, pushing a pair of zombies back into the fence before jamming their skulls through broken rebar. Jamal started pulling full tanks from the far stack. How many? Naomi asked. 4. No more, Cassandra said. We can carry 5 if we drop ammo, Naomi offered. No. Ammo first. They were working fast now. Every second counted. But the dead were closing in. Climbing the fence. Crawling through the alley. And this time, there were too many to outrun. We hold here, Gabriel said. Hold until they're done. Sherry tossed him a Molotov from her side pouch. Then let's make it count. Luca lit the first tank with a flare. If we lose this yard, we light it. Cassandra nodded. Last line of defense. The dead poured in. Gabriel fired. Sherry swung a hammer into a skull and kicked the body off her blade. Naomi shoved the last tank into her pack just as one of the dead lunged at her. Jamal tackled it midair, driving it into the concrete with a roar. Move, he yelled. Naomi, go now. She hesitated. Go, he screamed. She ran. So did Cassandra, Luca, and Sherry, covering each other, dragging the tanks, running like hell toward the alley exit. Behind them, Gabriel lit the fuse on a propane tank and threw it toward the densest pack of undead. Jamal grabbed another, rigged with a flare, and slammed it down beside the first. Then the world exploded. Cassandra hit the ground hard, ears ringing. Dust rained from the sky. Heat rolled down the alley in a wave. Screams were gone. Replaced by fire. And silence. She turned. No sign of Jamal or Gabriel. Just flames. Naomi coughed beside her. We got the fuel. Cassandra closed her eyes, fists clenched. Yes, she whispered. We did. But at what cost? Smoke still curled behind them as Cassandra, Naomi, Sherry, and Luca stumbled back into the core. The western breach opened briefly, just long enough to let them through. Once they were inside, the gate slammed shut with a metallic clang that echoed across the yard. Exhausted hands dragged propane tanks into storage while wide eyes watched for movement beyond the walls. They didn't even speak at first. The weight of what they'd left behind pressed harder than any wound. Gabriel. Jamal. Gone. Sherry dropped to her knees and stared at the tanks. All that, for 4 canisters. No, Cassandra said quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. All that, so we can still fight. Luca's face was pale. His clothes smelled of soot and blood. We shouldn't have made it back. But we did, Naomi answered, wiping black smears from her face. And we brought fire. The core came alive in the hours that followed. Naomi led the wiring of the propane canisters, connecting them to trip lines at both the west and south barricades. If the undead pushed again, they'd be met with more than steel and arrows, they'd face fire. The kind of fire that turned hunger into ash. Meanwhile, Cassandra called a meeting of the remaining survivors. Only 23 now. They gathered in the courtyard, seated on crates, makeshift benches, old tires. I'm not going to pretend we didn't lose something important out there, Cassandra began. Her voice was tired but steady. Gabriel and Jamal gave everything so we could still breathe. Some nodded. Others looked away. Grief had become a ritual here, quiet, private, and constant. But their sacrifice has meaning. For the first time since the walls went up, we have a defense that hurts the dead. We're not just surviving anymore. We're pushing back. Naomi raised her hand, holding up a crumpled piece of paper. And there's something else. Everyone turned. I've been tracking the radio patterns. After the last explosion, there was another signal. Stronger this time. Cassandra stepped forward, heart hammering. What did it say? Naomi unfolded the paper, smudged with oil and blood. It said, confirm position. Reinforcement window closing. Respond immediately. Gasps rippled through the group. Someone's listening, asked Lien, a wiry scout with a scar down her cheek. Yes, Naomi confirmed. And they think we might still be worth saving. For a moment, hope flickered across their faces. Then Cassandra said, then we have 2 jobs now. We hold this place, and we answer that call. The next few days blurred into motion. Cassandra assigned every person a dual role, defense and communication. While the watch crews monitored the barricades for breaches, Naomi worked with 2 others to repair and boost the radio's range using parts scavenged from broken generators and gutted cars. Luca and Sherry fortified the south wall with improvised flame traps, propane tanks strung with shrapnel, wired to pressure plates. The first time they tested one on a stray undead, the explosion lit up the night like a star falling from the sky. Everyone cheered. For the first time in weeks, they cheered. But the dead weren't gone. They never were. Every night, a few tested the edges, probing, snarling, watching. There was intelligence in some of them now, a twisted patience that unsettled even the hardened veterans. On the 5th night, Cassandra stood alone on the northwest tower. Her eyes scanned the darkness, fingers resting on the hilt of her machete. The fires on the wall flickered low, painting the air in orange hues. She thought of Gabriel's last words. When we make it out. Not if. When. She had to believe that still mattered. Naomi's voice crackled over the short-range radio clipped to Cassandra's vest. Cass. I got something. Cassandra pressed the receiver. Go. The signal's repeating. Stronger this time. Same message, confirm location. Window closing in 48 hours. Cassandra's pulse quickened. Can you respond? I'm trying. Interference is heavy. But I'll break through. Keep at it. We don't let this chance slip. She looked out beyond the wall, to where the skyline stood shattered and black. Somewhere past the ruins, someone was watching. Someone might be coming. They just had to survive 2 more days. But the undead weren't going to wait. At dawn, Lien spotted movement, large, organized. An entire pack was assembling outside the northern wall. Not a random swarm. A force. Cassandra climbed up just as the first shapes came into view. Not just walkers. But twisted ones. Sniffers. Leapers. Tall, thin figures with broken spines and heads that jerked in twitchy, unnatural angles. They're planning something, Lien whispered. They're evolving, Cassandra muttered. No, Naomi's voice came from behind them. They're preparing, same as we are. The wall groaned as the pressure began to build again. 23 humans stood inside the last fortress. Surrounded. Outnumbered. But now, they had fire. And they had each other. The moaning began before sunrise. Low, guttural, constant, like a storm rumbling just beneath the earth. From the top of the north tower, Cassandra could see them now. Hundreds. Maybe more. They weren't charging. Not yet. They were waiting. Pacing. Watching. The twisted ones, the sniffers, leapers, and bone walkers, moved among the slower dead like predators among cattle. They were bigger. Smarter. And they didn't blink. Not once. She gripped her machete tighter and pressed the comm to her lips. This is it. All positions, prepare for full siege protocol. Inside the core, the last 23 survivors sprang into motion. Flame traps were armed. Ammo caches unlocked. Ration kits were opened for distribution. A system honed by weeks of war kicked in. Every person knew their role. There would be no second chances. Luca climbed up beside Cassandra, sweat already clinging to his forehead despite the chill. West wall's holding for now. Naomi's still in the van, she's trying to get one final signal out. She has 48 hours, Cassandra muttered. But I don't think they're going to give us that long. Below, Sherry and Lien rolled barrels of fuel into the firing lanes. Each was wrapped with nails, broken glass, and flame packs. If the undead got too close, they'd be greeted by firestorms. At the front gate, 2 younger survivors, Danny and Irisa, stood ready with Molotovs. They were barely 19, but their hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Fear had long since been burned out of them. Then the growling shifted. Louder. Closer. Cassandra's eyes narrowed. Here they come. It started at the north wall. The first wave was slow, testing their defenses, trying the same weak spots as before. A few flung themselves against the barricades. They were met with arrows and bolts. Quick, clean. Controlled. But then the second wave came. Leapers. Fast. Crooked limbs. Long claws. They didn't aim for the gate, they scaled the wall itself, crawling like spiders, hissing as they moved. Tower breach. Lien screamed. Northwest side. Take them down. Cassandra yelled. Flames erupted along the wall as Naomi remotely triggered the first propane trap. A column of fire engulfed the wall. Screeches echoed across the core. Then a third wave surged from the east. Diversion. They were surrounding the core, pressing every side at once. East wall under pressure. Luca called out from his scope. They're coming with numbers this time. Split teams. Rotate archers. Cassandra ordered. Sherry and Irisa sprinted to the east platform, where 3 bonewalkers were already slamming into the steel barricade. They were tall, deformed, and strong, every hit dented the metal. We need fire on them now. Sherry shouted. Danny hurled a Molotov from above. It smashed into one of the walkers. Fire spilled across its back. It didn't stop. Not even a twitch. Cassandra grabbed a signal flare and fired straight into its face. The walker lit up like dry hay. Its shriek was deafening as it stumbled and collapsed. But 2 more took its place. Meanwhile, inside the command van, Naomi worked the radio with trembling hands. Core Fortress, Final 30. Do you read me? This is Naomi Shaw. 23 survivors. Coordinates embedded. Zone under siege. Requesting immediate evac confirmation. Static. Then. Stand by. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. Say again. Did you say stand by? Position confirmed, evac window active, 40 hours. Her eyes went wide. She grabbed the portable radio and ran outside. Cassandra was on the front line now, using her machete to cleave through an infected that had made it through the wall. Blood sprayed. She turned just as Naomi appeared. They heard us. Naomi cried. They confirmed. Evac's coming. Cassandra blinked. How long? 40 hours. The cheer that followed wasn't loud, but it was real. For the first time in weeks, hope was more than a word. We just have to survive 40 more hours, Sherry said through bloodied teeth. But everyone knew the truth. That meant surviving another night. By dusk, 3 propane traps were already spent. The walls were scorched. The towers were barely standing. One of the barracks had caught fire and had to be collapsed to keep the flames from spreading. And still, the dead pressed in. They never tired. They never stopped. They clawed, climbed, tore, and screamed. Inside the core, food was down to 2 days. Ammunition, less than that. 4 survivors had been injured. One, Irisa, was losing too much blood. Cassandra stood at the center of the yard, surrounded by her people. We're not giving them the core, she said. Not now. Not after everything. Luca stepped forward. We'll hold. Wall by wall. Brick by brick. Naomi raised the flare gun. And when we can't hold anymore, we light the final beacon. Then we make our last stand. Cassandra looked toward the horizon, where the fires of the dead glowed like eyes in the night. Let them come, she thought. This place was more than a fortress. It was a promise. And the final 30, now the final 23, weren't done yet. The beacon flare was red. Bright, burning, a signal that pierced through the ash-choked sky. It wasn't a call for help anymore. It was a declaration. We are still here. We are still fighting. From the roof of the northern tower, Cassandra watched the flare spiral upward and burst above the city like a blood-colored star. Below her, the core shook with motion. Not from the survivors, but from the swarm surrounding them. Naomi stood beside her, face pale, clutching the radio receiver like it was the last thread holding her to sanity. They saw it, she whispered. They have to. Cassandra kept her eyes on the horizon. Evac's coming. 40 hours, Naomi murmured. We're down to 18 now. They'll come. Naomi didn't reply. Her silence said everything. Down below, the inner yard had turned into a war zone. Luca was dragging steel panels toward the weak point in the south wall. Flames licked across the outer barricade, scorching the dead as they pressed inward. The traps had bought them time, but only barely. Danny knelt beside Arisa, who was barely conscious. Her arm had been torn open by a bonewalker's claw. She needed real medical attention, more than makeshift stitches and cloth soaked in whiskey. She's burning up, he told Sherry. Sherry didn't answer. Her jaw was clenched, hands coated in blood. She looked up at the sky instead, where the flare still glowed faintly like a dying ember. They better get here soon. By midnight, the dead had stopped pretending. They charged. Not in waves, but in floods, pouring at every wall, clawing over one another in frantic piles, snarling, shrieking, throwing themselves against steel and fire with no concern for survival. The pressure was unbearable. Sandbags burst. Steel tore loose. One section of the east wall collapsed completely, forcing Cassandra's team into a brutal close-quarters defense line behind burning cars and barrels. Naomi shouted from the command van. They're breaching. Northeast corridor, 20 incoming. Cassandra turned, slashing her machete across a leaper's neck, then grabbing the radio. Trigger trap Delta. Naomi hit the switch. Boom. The propane tank detonated, a ball of fire lighting up the eastern yard. Screams from the dead, horrible, guttural, wrong, echoed across the zone. A dozen creatures vaporized in an instant. But 5 kept coming. Sherry and Lien moved in, swinging crowbars, machetes, even broken shovels. Every impact was a scream. Every step forward was bought with sweat and blood. We can't hold this. Luca shouted. We need to collapse the corridor and fall back. Cassandra hesitated. If they fell back again, there'd be only one barrier left, the gate to the bunker beneath the core. No escape routes. No fallback lines. Just a steel door and a last stand. But they were out of time. Fall back, she ordered. Seal the corridor behind you. The survivors collapsed the narrow hallway with a jury-rigged fuel charge. Rubble thundered down, trapping the remaining dead and cutting them off from the yard. The explosion threw dust into the air. It settled slowly, like the quiet that follows a scream. Now only 15 survivors remained. 8 were dead or missing. Lost in the night. Naomi crouched near the van, clutching the receiver. They're not answering anymore. I keep transmitting. I keep repeating. But nothing's coming back. Cassandra knelt beside her. Don't stop. Even if they don't answer. Keep going. They promised, Naomi whispered. They promised they saw the flare. Cassandra put a hand on her shoulder. They saw it. But we don't wait for rescue. We earn it. That night, the core fell into eerie silence. No moans. No claws on the walls. No scratching. Just the crackle of dying fires and the soft hum of the last working generator. They're regrouping, Luca muttered. They know we're almost spent. They're not hunting, Sherry added grimly. They're starving. Desperate. They won't wait until dawn. Inside the bunker, the final 15 prepared for the last push. Weapons were sharpened. Traps were reset. Wounds were treated, as best they could be. Arisa had stopped speaking. Her breathing was shallow. Danny sat beside her, holding her hand. She's not going to make it, Naomi said. Cassandra nodded. She knew that. But she stayed. They all had. Even when running made more sense. Even when the walls cracked and fire consumed everything. Even when hope thinned into ash. They stayed. Because someone had to. In the final hour before dawn, Cassandra gathered them one last time. The evac might come, she said. Or it might not. But we don't die behind these walls. Not quietly. Not hopeless. Luca nodded. They'll remember us. Only if we make them, Cassandra replied. Then she raised her machete and pointed toward the gate. The moment they break through, we light the last beacon. And we fight. Around her, her people, exhausted, bloodied, but unbroken, stood with her. The final 15. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond the firelight, the dead waited. Ready for the final push. Next up, Part 8, 15 Against the End, Finale. The first crack came just before dawn. A low, groaning snap, the sound of steel warping under pressure. Every survivor inside the bunker froze. Cassandra turned her head toward the sound. So did Luca. Sherry reached for her hammer. Naomi tightened her grip on the remote detonator wired to the last propane traps. 15 left. No more walls. No more escape. Just the bunker gate, and beyond it, the enemy that had swallowed the rest of the world. Cassandra stepped forward. Positions. No hesitation. The final 15 moved into formation like it was second nature. This place, this fight, it was all they had known for weeks. Maybe months. There were no civilians anymore. Only warriors. Naomi crouched near the trigger point. Flame lines are primed. Propane's wired. If we go big. Cassandra looked her in the eyes. Not yet. We only light it when they're through. The walls shook again. Then silence. Then, crash. The gate slammed inward. Steel burst. The first wave poured in. Dead eyes. Twisted limbs. Crawling, sprinting, falling. Bone walkers. Leapers. Sniffers. Every kind. The worst of the worst. They surged through the opening like a dam had broken. Now! Cassandra screamed. Naomi hit the trigger. Boom! The corridor erupted in fire. Propane tanks exploded with a roar, engulfing the first line of undead in a blaze so hot it melted the nearest wall supports. Screeches of burning monsters filled the bunker. But others kept coming, charred and snarling. Luca led the front line, swinging his reinforced crowbar into skulls. Sherry hammered a leaper into the concrete, cracking its head open like a melon. Lien fired her last 3 shotgun shells point-blank before switching to a kitchen cleaver. Cassandra moved like a shadow through the chaos, her machete singing through air and flesh. She didn't think anymore, only acted. Only fought. Naomi grabbed the shortwave radio with her free hand. This is the core. Final 15, under siege. If you're out there, we're not giving up. We're not done. No reply. Just static. She dropped the receiver and picked up a flare. A red one. Her hands shook. She fired. The last beacon soared into the smoke-filled sky. Outside, from a ruined building across the dead zone, a satellite camera blinked to life. It caught the flare. And transmitted the signal. Inside the bunker, the survivors were being driven backward. Smoke choked the halls. 2 propane traps were gone. The last had misfired. The infected were getting in. Danny was on the floor, trying to cover Irisa's body. A leaper lunged toward him, but Cassandra was there first, driving her blade through its jaw. Blood sprayed across her arm, but she didn't stop. Fall back to the center, she yelled. Use the cars. They pulled into the last line, cars they'd welded into the core's foundation. A U-shaped barrier. Behind it was the radio van. The very heart of their home. "Last stand," Luca said. "Together?" "Together," Cassandra answered. The infected rushed in. The final 15 met them. Fists. Blades. Fire. Bottles of acid. Screams of pain. Shouts of defiance. Bodies fell, some theirs, some undead. Naomi crouched behind the van, sobbing quietly as she sent one more transmission, voice hoarse, blood on her shirt. "Please, we're still here." And then, a roar overhead. Not from the infected. From above. A low mechanical hum rising into a thunder. They looked up. A gunship. Black, military grade. Lights cutting through the smoke. It hovered over the bunker like an angel of war. A voice crackled through loudspeakers. "Core survivors, confirmed. Hold position." Luca laughed, then cried. Naomi dropped the radio and just stared. The gunship opened fire. Twin machine guns raked the street. Undead exploded in sprays of dark mist. The crowd scattered. Some burned. Others crawled. All of them ran. It was the first time they'd ever seen the dead run away. 15 minutes later, the evac landed in the yard. 3 soldiers emerged in black armor, sweeping the area. "Final 30, one asked. Cassandra, barely standing, nodded. 15, left. The soldier glanced around. "You held this?" "We built this." He gave a small nod. "You earned your way out." As they loaded the survivors onto the gunship, Naomi stayed behind for a second, her hand brushing the bunker's scorched door. Sherry touched her arm. "Leave it." It did what it was meant to do. They lifted off. And as the core shrank below, Cassandra looked out over the city. Blackened. Broken. But no longer silent. They were the final 30. Now the final 15. But from that day forward, they would be remembered as something else. The ones who held the last fortress. And lit the fire that refused to die. End.